Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Dutzy Gaming and a new video showcasing my practice run for a Lightning Strike Champion League Starter. Now this run was done on a fresh account to mimic a League Start environment. The build uses a 5 Link chest, 2 1 Chaos swords and a belt that's between 1 to 5 Chaos at League Start. The rest of the gear is mediocre fractured gear crafted with Screaming Essences that I picked up as I progressed the Atlas. The build was super smooth and I was able to rush Atlas completion using Wandering Path without needing to take any league mechanics on the tree to get currency to upgrade the build. The only nodes I took were more chance to drop connected maps and chance to duplicate maps. The build is designed to clear the Atlas on a shoestring, then get a few Divines further investment to mop up the last 2 Void Stones. The build can actually scale to enough damage and defenses to do most mapping content and invitations, but this does require a couple of uniques which are rarer, so the final version, if you did want to push it, may cost up to 10 Divines. It might be much cheaper, but I don't know the variance in terms of unique prices. The point of the build is to be able to get to a point where I can farm currency quickly with putting in the least amount of money I can into the build, so that whatever I earn once I unlock my Atlas can go towards upgrading this character or to a brand new character. For leveling the build goes from Splitting Steel in Act 1 using 2-handers through to Spectral Helix when you pick that up at level 12. Stick with 2-handers until you get the dual wield mastery. Then, once I get my first lab completed, the +1 strike mastery and multi-strike, I'll switch to Lightning Strike. I prefer the skill. It's a little bit clunky without Pierce, but I still prefer it to Spectral Helix. And because you can double hit, single target is pretty decent. A combination of Onslaught on Kill, a Quicksilver Flask and Adrenaline makes leveling from here very quick and pretty smooth. At level 58, I hit up Heist for a Chaos Injection to get a 5 Link and 2 Ichimondris, and also farm the Vile Orbs to turn a Lightning Strike gem into Vile Lightning Strike. This is what I'll do at League Start. I was only in Heist for 20 to 30 minutes and I walked out with 40 Chaos. You don't need the weapons now, but the sooner you get them the better, as it just makes the build much more damage, just much smoother overall. They're dirt cheap, they're going to be 1 to 2C even if people are after them. I'd been buying demolition contracts on level 50 plus, so that when I went in at 58 I had plenty of contracts to use. The build from here, other than balancing attributes and resistances and just getting better overall rare gear at some point in maps, is now pretty good to push the entire Atlas and get the Void Stones. So let's explain how the build does damage, as on paper it looks dreadful. I'm basically combining a lot of different buffs and buff effect to scale up all the auras that I'm running. I'm also non-crit, so I can use Precise Technique Keystone to get 40% more damage. So let's break down how this mini aura scaling works. So Champion gets 35% increased effect of non-curse auras from the Ascendancy. We're also running 2 Ichimondri swords that give another 10% each for a combined of 20. And then we also pick up 6% on the tree. This gives us a modest total of 61% increased effect, but that is a decent buff. You can get a lot more with cluster jewels and anointments, but since the idea was to keep the build cheap, I've decided against this. The swords also give me 10% increased mana reservation efficiency per sword, so that's 20% in total. All this combined allows me to run 3 50% auras if I just fit in 1 mana reservation cluster jewel of either Grace, Determination or Wrath efficiency, and these are very cheap at League Start or easy to self-craft. Scaling Wrath is where most of the damage comes from, as it gives more flat lightning damage. Scaling Grace and Determination gives me defenses, but it also gives me more attack damage, since the Perseverance Belt gives me more damage based on the lowest of my armor and evasion stat. The more increased aura effect we get, the higher our evasion and our armor goes, the more damage we do. The key part of the build in terms of single target is actually Smite. Now we're not using Smite to get damage from the skill, but the buff it provides. So when you use Smite, it then releases an aura that gives you flat lightning damage, and it is a lot of flat lightning damage. By linking the gem to increase duration, every time I use Smite, I get a lightning damage buff for 7 to 8 seconds. The buff is around 35% more damage, so equivalent to probably 1.5 to 2 extra support gems. Now this is only used on bosses and tanky rares. You don't need to keep this buff up through your entire mapping, but you can if you want to. We don't run any curses or marks, so mechanically it works the same. You get to a boss, you hit the boss with Smite, you get your 7-second buff window, and then you reapply it after, if the boss lives that long. On maps that don't have a ton of more monster life, I was dispatching bosses in 4 to 5 seconds, so there was no need to recast it. But it's definitely something you should cast, because the increased or even more damage it gives you is insane. it really, really helped with pinnacle boss fights as well. They were quite slow anyway, but I think without the smite buff, I think it maybe could have got to the point where, yes, you can do it because the character's quite tanky, but I might not want to do it because it takes so long. The last part of the damage comes from the adrenaline buff provided by champion. So when you reach low life, you proc adrenaline. By using Corrupting Fever linked to support gems that add to the life cost, you can get it so that it removes half of your life, therefore giving you adrenaline at the push of a button. It lasts 20 seconds, so you just need to recast it every 20 seconds while you're mapping. Adrenaline and Smite cannot be overlooked. They're both key parts of the build, and they literally double the damage that your build does. So in summary, yes, it is a bit more button pressing than I would like, and you do have to manage your buffs, but it has been a great way to get a skill working that otherwise would take a lot of investment. And as I say, Smite is only needed for bossing. Adrenaline, you just have to proc every 20 seconds. It's no different to having a Divine Blessing or another aura that you have to proc every time it drops off. I'm fully aware that the DPS on screen is hardly groundbreaking. However, I wanted to go worst case scenario. In all likelihood, most people, by the time they get to kill the pinnacle bosses, are going to have at least a corrupted 6-link. You also might have some Eater or Exile implicits to add something to the build. So overall, I think if you're a player that's not going to rush your Atlas, you can expect 10 to 20% more DPS. My gems had also not yet hit level 20 and had no quality on them. I was impressed, however, with the DPS. It was similar to what I've had on previous league starts, where I've needed a 6-link and better gear. The main reason for picking this build is that for attack builds, weapons are always the problem. So when you play Rain of Arrows or Lightning Arrow or any build that needs rare weapons, is getting or crafting those weapons that's a big expense, and I don't have to worry about that because I'm using 2 swords that are going to be 1 chaos at league start. It isn't a build that hits a wall there though. You can actually scale this quite a lot if you want to put some currency into it. It can get endgame scaling up to about 10 mil burst TPS. You're not going to push much more than that because you're not crit, you're not stacking armor or particularly scaling auras that heavily, but you could get it to a position where it can do all of the mapping content you want. It will get your invitations done, it will get your full void stones. But there's some items that I don't know how expensive they're going to be this league because the economy of this league was very broken. And anything that didn't drop in cemetery maps was very, very expensive. Looking back the league before, the items I want are going to be less than 10 divines, and it's something that I'm going to put into the build and then hopefully play it for a few weeks. We can get a Wrath Watcher's Eye, pen if possible, but penetration ones are normally really expensive. But something like precision damage or attack speed or lightning damage with Wrath work really well as well. You can get some decent Eldritch implicits. You can get things like lightning exposure on hit, another +1 strike, extra aura effect, action speed, loads of good things to increase our DPS. You get level 21 aura gems, they're going to make a big difference. Get better cluster jewels, get jewelry with flat lightning on. Lethal Pride with double damage is going to help too, and it's going to ease your strength requirements. And then you can go for something like a 2020 Vile Lightning Strike gem because that gives you +1 projectile. The final piece of the build that will add an absolute ton of damage, but I don't know what cost it's going to be, at league start, is an amulet that you get from Esh, which is called Voice of the Storm. This essentially gives your non-critical strikes with lightning damage, it rolls them luckily. So it basically means it rolls the damage twice. This, again, is about a 40% more damage increase to the build. This league, at league start, they were about 100C. The league before they were as well. They went to a point in this league where there were about 6 divines, but I purely think that's because there weren't any on the market because everyone was doing Magic Find. This league, I have no idea. It's not that much of a common item because I don't think Breach is done by a lot of people, but with the mini rework they're doing with opening the hands automatically, maybe more people are going to go into Breach. That's what I'm hoping anyway. But even if you had to pay a few divines for this amulet, it's well worth putting it onto the build because it adds an absolute ton of damage. So I'm not going to release any endgame POBs yet. That's just some ideas if you wanted to try it and scale it, because I don't really want to release my proper guide until we have patch notes and I know that the build is untouched. So just so you can know there's no shenanigans going on, we'll go and do a quick map showcase with the character. This is as was when I finished my last map for completion. We'll just very quickly go through the gear as well. So the fractured gear is slightly better than you get at league start because people just don't put average fractured items up for sale. But I'm overcapped on my resistances by quite a bit. And I'm also overcapped on intelligence, which are the fractured items that I bought. So you basically just have to assume instead of these fractures being T1, they're probably going to be something like T3. So we have a helmet, which I've started rolling implicits on, but haven't got one that's any good. And I essentially just rolled this with the Screaming Life Essences that I obtained. We have a 5 link chest. I couldn't buy a 5 link chest because no one was selling them. So I had a 6 link lying around. So I've just counted this as a 5 link. Obviously it's fractured. Your item wouldn't be fractured, but it's not a very well rolled item. It's got half decent life, rubbish strength, rubbish lightning resistance, fractured fire, and I haven't crafted anything on it. So the rings are crafted with spite essences here for intelligence and rage essences here for strength. So the fractures are slightly better than you'd probably get at League Start, but you just can't buy rubbish fractured items at this stage. But so just assume this fractures around 30%. You then use your essence, then you just craft life. I got lucky and hit some lightning damage, and it does actually make quite a difference to the build, the flat lightning damage. And then the other ring here, as say another fractured ring, we just use the strength essence, we craft life, job done. The amulet, I've bought a fractured lightning damage one, but this could be fractured intelligence, fractured strength, anything really. Again, I've just used intelligence essences on this and then crafted life. We've allocated divine judgment because it's super cheap. It's a black oil and then 2 1 chaos oils. The gloves are fractured attack speed. Again, just assume this is maybe 12%. And these we've crafted with lightning resistance essences. Didn't even craft life because I only had 2 essences. So I've then just crafted cold resistance on top of that. Again, the implicits do nothing because I haven't hit the ones that I want. The boots, you should be fine to pick up some fractured life boots. They're not normally expensive. Let's just assume these might be 60 life. And then I've used Zeal essences and then just crafted lightning resistance. Again, I've tried to roll some implicits. I actually did hit onslaught, which does a tiny bit, but I don't think it actually hits the break point to make our attack speed much better. So I'm not actually sure whether this does anything at all. Got our perseverance belt. And then we have 2 etymologies. We've got 1 minimum rolled 20% attack speed and 1 25% attack speed. So just to kind of simulate average rolls. Attack speed is really the only roll that matters. The 10% is always 10% for both the buff and the mana. And the physical damage doesn't do anything. We're not scaling that part of the build. The fact they have 40% global accuracy per sword helps a lot because it makes it much easier to make sure our accuracy is above our life. Flask, just standard. I've got a quartz flask to get some phasing and suppression. Armor flask for movement speed. Jade flask with armor, and then a quicksilver flask with evasion. This should probably be curse effect instead of movement speed, but I was running low on alterations, and then just a bleeding life flask. In terms of the tree, we just have this cluster jewel here, which is just a 2 passive Storm Drinker and Prismatic Heart. Really doesn't matter what notables you get. 1 with lightning penetration is beneficial. And then we just have this mana reservation jewel that I rolled myself just by spamming alterations, then regaling. It doesn't have to be a 3 passive. You could get away with a 2 passive if they're much, much cheaper. And then what you might do is if you needed a bit of extra mana, you can either get it on gear or just take either these 2 nodes here, or you could even come down here. But realistically, you probably take these 2 nodes here. And that's kind of it. There's no jewels in the build yet, apart from this 1 jewel I had drop, which is life and melee damage. So it does very little because we're half melee, half proj. Just gives a tiny bit more life. In terms of auras, we've got Defiance Banner, a low-level precision just to make sure I'm accuracy capped. Got Determination, we have Wrath, and then we have Grace. The 5 link I settled for was Lightning Strike, Multi-Strike, LE damage with attacks, Volatility, and Added Lightning. So we'll just go and run this Bazaar map. So it's triple curse, 2 unique bosses, can't be taunted, can't be modified below base value. I haven't played this build for a few days. Hopefully I'm not too rusty. So I'll talk through playstyle while I'm going. So hopefully I don't die. We'll do the deli as well. Running Blood Rage for attack speed and frenzy charges. And then obviously a Corrupting Fever. Smite, just use it when you get to an awkward enemy. So you'll put your Blood Rage on. Use your Corrupting Fever. Then life just to make sure you get back. And then off we go. Now, I don't have any MTX on because this is a fairly new account that has 0 MTX on it. So the character does look a bit duff, but is what it is. And I hate the standard Lightning Strike. So then when you get a decent chunk of enemies, you can use your Vile Lightning Strike. My adrenaline's fallen off, so I'll put it back on. But the build is pretty tanky. I don't have any way to deal with kind of damage over times. But in terms of hit damage, LE damage, we've got almost capped spell suppression just from the Lucky node. So then if you wanted a little bit of a buff, you can activate your Smite. Did I call it Smite? I mean Smite, obviously. Adrenaline's fallen off again. I've got a terrible loot filter on for this. Of picking up, it's got way too much stuff dropping on the ground, but so this is probably not a good example map because there's so many things that get in the way of your lightning strike projectiles on this map. But I've only just completed my atlas, so I'm not really sport for choice. I only had like 4 T16 maps. We've obviously got 3 curses on us, so we take more fizz damage, and then we do less damage with enfeeble. So we'll try and find the boss. So with this enemy, because he's a bit tanky, very tanky, then that's what I do smite for. I called it smite again. Right, so we've got 4 layers of delirium. That will do. I don't really want to have the boss doing anything horrible to me. Might as well take some embers as well. I don't think we want that, so we'll wait for our daily rewards and then we'll go in and kill the boss. We don't need to level Corrupting Fever up. So we'll pick this up, even though I'm probably not going to revisit this account, but that's quite nice. Is this good? It's not. But we got 2 daily orbs, it's alright. So you drop the Vile Lightning Strike on the boss after you've activated your aura. And then because we've got Enfeeble, this will take longer than normal. A lot longer than normal. And then we'll drop another Vile Lightning Strike and kill him off. Let's say, more life maps make a massive difference because we probably just have the burst DPS to get T16 bosses down in sort of, I would say 6 to 7 seconds for your smite buff. But I won't be kind of juicing maps. I'm going to be doing altar farming and boss rushing where I'd do them scoured. So this build will easily handle it. And let's say we're still on a 5 link, not to forget. So there's certainly more to go. But I don't mind the bosses taking a little while because the build feels really tanky. I have died twice in maps. One was to freeze because I didn't have my Pantheon yet. And the other one was a very, very juiced, corrupted map. And I hit my adrenaline just as the monster connected with me and I died. That's kind of it for the video. As I say, there will be a League Start guide coming out if I decide to play this build. I will play this build, if I'm honest, if it doesn't get changed. But it is designed just as something to get me into the Atlas nice and quick. There is going to be hundreds of better guides. I'm not going to sell this as this is an amazing build. It's just quite a nice way I've found to get this build working. But if you want like a meta League Start or you want something that you can progress much further on early on with a bit more investment, then obviously go with that build. This is not me trying to sway you. This is just what I want to play because it's been a ton of fun. That's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. Our POBs are in the video description. Take care and see you in the next one.